On this portion, we're dealing with reliquary figures in African art. These are containers that hold relics of the dead, reliquary, and they believe to have powers of those people that can help the living. These are related to Nkandi figures because they are connected to the spirit world, and reliquary figures can take many shapes. They could be baskets, boxes, bundles. They may hold bone and other substances. In this example, we have a sculpted head form. It's carved in wood or sometimes metal. They will not be portraits of specific people. It's just a protector of relic material, and it would also be decorative. It's going to represent the culture, and they will be used in rituals. And again, the heads would be further decorated for that particular ritual. Some cultures have full figures, and they use them to consult with the dead, and they use them for guidance and advice. Also used in initiation rituals, bringing youth into adulthood. And this was vital for the Fang of Gabon. They lived in the rainforests of Cameroon and Gabon, and there are about 20 clans. Beta Pahuan is an ethnic group. They were nomadic. They spoke Bantu, and they were mainly, majority were Christianized, most of them by the 20th century. Fang was the most politically powerful clan in Gabon and known for their reliquary statuary. Most famous is the Great Bieri, and it is in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. This is an ancestor cult. The figure would have been attached to a base and filled with relic objects, and again, venerated and used somehow in worship, in rituals. This particular one is special, found by Robert Goldwater. Robert Goldwater says that this was the embodiment of Fang sculpture and one of the great classics of African art. Measurements, it is 18 and 5/6 inches tall. Wide, it's 9 and 3/4, and deep, 6 and 5/8. Made of wood, metal, and palm oil. The oil gives it a black burnished surface, almost very shiny. It's a simplified head, broad forehead, narrow chin, almost teardrop in shape. The ears are high, and it had an elaborate um, hairstyle, a wig-like headdress that would have been worn, called an ikuma, the same that would be worn by Fang warriors in 19th century. In addition, it has these two cylindrical roll forms, as a third one on the back of the head. The eyes are metal discs. It has a very strong brow that's just been incised, etched into the wood, and a simple line for a mouth with a very long cylindrical neck. And remember that this would not be a specific person, it's just, again, an object to hold other items. It was connected to a box containing the skulls of, I think it was 10 generations of family lineage. It was portable and an ancestral shrine, Ensek Bieri, and this would be taken during migration, so it's portable, would have been moved with, and they would take it again because they believed it offered protection. An elder in the clan maintained it. You notice that on this one there's been some abrasion here on the mouth and chin, and it also has a long vertical crack in the wood. This was first owned by Chilean poet Vincent, and that's his last name, who moved to Paris in 1916. He was friends with Picasso, Juan Gris, and Jacques Lipchitz, and he sold it to an art dealer, Paul Guillaume. Guillaume then sold it to a British sculptor, Jacob Epstein, and in 1961, Goldwater purchased it for the New York Museum. It was transferred to the Met, and this piece was one of the pieces that helped create the Arts of Africa, Oceania, and Americas, and it is one of its most important pieces in that collection today. Now, this enters the Western consciousness in the wake of looting of African treasures. So you'd have all these people going over there, the colonialists, and they would just take these items or they would destroy items. So some were collected through the military, and others were just simply collected, which meant that they just took them. Masquerade in African art, form, and function. This is the most extensive and complex aspects of African art. Almost all societies used masks. Herbert Cole, 1985, wrote that there is no comprehensive treatment of African masks or masquerades has yet been published. It is too vast, too numerous, and too diverse. There are a variety of elements used in masks. Also, the processes used were very different, and the activities with which they were used were different. But there are some commonalities. Basics in that it would cover the head or face. They were used in rituals, and there would be specific guidelines for the materials, shapes, and size. Most were carved by professionals, and they could have been made out of metal, stone, pottery, or fabrics, and decorated with pelts, teeth, feathers, and shells. They would be consistent in the villages. Face, eye, mouth emphasize simplification. There would be some distortion or exaggeration, but again, simplified forms. And it's supposed to capture the spirit of a character. We use significant materials: skins, cloth, fiber, metal, beadwork, and they would have humanoid or animal features or both. Would be metahuman and other intangible spirit forces, meant, of course, to hide the identity of the wearer, and that there would be some transformation as if that person would take on the spirit of the mask or whatever it represented. There would be other costume elements: cloth and raffia costumes, along with rattles, fly whisks, and weapons. It is to embody and deceive sought-after prey or placate spirits. Rock painting showed people wearing masks. And again, the true origins are not really known. Many myths about how masks came into being. Women were first to know the secret of masks, but then the power was taken by men. And they're used by dancers, musicians, and audience. Um, it would be organized. The rituals would be choreographed and rehearsed. And there would be dances and songs, and sometimes very dramatic. They may spit fire or speak. But again, the women knew the true origins, but then men took them over, and then it was mainly men who wore the masks and took part in the rituals. It is consistent with Nkandi in that it's going to build bridges between the living and the spirits. In a museum, when you see one of these items, it's far removed from intended setting, as remember, these were meant to be used in rituals. The Chokwe people of Angola. The Lunda Empire was in Angola at the end of the 16th to 19th centuries. It achieved independence and became Zambia and Democratic Republic of Congo. There were small chiefdoms. They were autonomous but consistent. They were a hunting society, professional hunting society, and they had strong masking culture. Piwo is celebrated first female ancestors. It was a matrilineal society, and masks were used to reincarnate the feminine ancestor of Chokwe and encourage fertility. This was a ritual performed with Chiongo, a male counterpart. He brought wealth, so together the two represented fertility and prosperity. This particular item is carved in wood. It had woven fibers for hair, brass rings, in pierced ears. And this particular item is 10 and 5/8 inches high, 7 inches wide. Um, it does, again, wide forehead, narrow chin. The eyes are not as, head is not as elongated as with the previous example. Facial elements are detailed. Eyebrows are high and arched, meeting in the center, very thin line here to represent the nose. And the eyebrows are heart-shaped nostrils. The eyes, again, imitate cowrie shells. The ears are deeply carved, and mouth, again, is carved with something projecting from the lips, and the teeth would be sharp and filed. This would represent feminine beauty in Chokwe culture. The lines represent tattoos or scarification, very tight grid. And again, these would enhance beauty. This particular tattoo or scar would be called a cosmogram. Cheeks, the lines here might represent tears, and this would be one of Piwo's key ritual functions. It was a ritual for initiation, transitioning from child to adulthood, and it's going to represent also the dissolution between mothers and sons. As a son grows up, he no longer needs the mother. So for the mother here, there is pride that the son has grown, but also sorrow in that it's ending the relationship. And so here we have those tears. So although this is a mask of a female, it still would have been danced, performed by a male, and it would have a costume with cotton drapes and false breasts. And the person would also have carried rattles and fly whisks. Symbols of kingship. The political leader was also the supreme spiritual figure and divine. Um, they often had leopard as the main symbol of chieftainship because it embodies qualities such as courage, strength, ferocity, and cunning. Elephant would represent power, also head and hand. Hand was for man's power, head was for good fortune, and this is according to William Fagg. Royal regalia, crowns, jewelry, staffs, fans, swords, weapons, masks, thrones, stools, headrests, bowls, cups, and instruments, and made out of precious material, gold, ivory, or beads. Ivory, these are some of the first objects that came out of Africa. Ivory pieces were given to rulers. They were considered exotic. And there was more interest in these items after the Brits conquered Benin in 1897. Ivory is a hard white material from teeth and tusks of animals, mainly elephants. It was considered a luxury in Africa. They would make hair combs, knife handles, and sacred figures out of them. Ivory became a primary export for piano keys and false teeth. Portuguese considered it white gold, and it would have been sought after by Portuguese in 15th and 16th centuries. They even Portuguese would commission people to make images, figures out of it. The Yombe would be in northwest of the Democratic Republic of Congo and Republic of Congo. There were many clans who migrated in the 15th and 17th centuries. Mbenza was south from Gabon, and they would have the Manyanga and Bwende. Today there are 9 clans. They have their own rulers. They're elected in recognition of social status, wealth, and oratory skills. And a scepter would be a symbol. So here is our next piece, the finial of a royal scepter. The finial is the piece that would go in the top portion of that scepter or staff. So it is this particular item, 22 by 7 inches by 4.5 centimeters. So we have a figure with crossed legs holding a horn or a scepter, and in the other has an object raised to the mouth. This is likely a king. It's wearing a headdress with woven band. It's got a necklace with a pendant, a braided belt, wide eyes, and a prominent nose, and chewing something, perhaps a hallucinogenic root that would enable it to commune with the spirit world. The top of this was hollowed out, and it would be a receptacle for perhaps the plant that this guy is chewing here. Below, there is a bound hand and a slave. You see the head to the left. So this would represent spiritual authority, success in overcoming enemies. It's made out of ivory, so it's precious, and all represented authority of the chief. People of Cameroon grasslands, there were smaller subgroups, Bamileke, Bamum, Baminde Tikar. They are from the north during the Bantu migration. Spirits were held in preserved skulls. They were into farming and animal husbandry and hunted a little. The groups were different, but they still had a same political system. And through royalty, architecture of culture is represented. Each village paid allegiance to a single chief, a Fon, and it would be a sacred representation of the founding dynasty of his kingdom, the traditional political leader of his people, and the ideal embodiment of traditions and values. Um, there would be a head, this would be the main performer, the head of a dominant family, selected by the predecessors, and usually elected through status. And status again demonstrated through the objects. And so the palace would be was central to the illustration of the status. So Great Zimbabwe, the stone hill, was an example. Germans arrived in Cameroon in 1902, followed by the Brits, and they would rule the West Cameroon. After World War II, Cameroon became a United Nations Trust territory, but was still under control of the Brits. 1961, it joins Independent Republic of Cameroon, French Cameroon, but later becomes Federal Republic of Cameroon, and then is renamed United Republic of Cameroon in 72, and then Republic of Cameroon in 84. Western culture is still influential. Traditional buildings, they were groupings of raffia. They were pole buildings. There would be a clearly marked entrance and have a large public hall. Only high rank were allowed further beyond the public hall into the living quarters for the Fawn and his wife, kids, and male servants. There would also be a royal grave and a shrine to the queen mother of the Fawn's first or favorite wife would run the palace. And it would border on a large open square which would be used for markets and religious gatherings. The focal point would be the entrance, and it would be visible illustration of wealth. It would also house the royal treasury, be a center for their art. The building became the most valuable treasure, and it would be decorated, perhaps carved pillars, as we see here, decorated door jambs, lintels, and windowsills. King Njoya Palace at Fumban. It became into disrepair, and since it was made of flammable materials, they were often burnt and would be rebuilt. The most contemporary of these palaces have succumbed to the pragmatic benefits of mud brick and metal room constructions. While the modern versions are aesthetically inferior, they required less maintenance. Capital city of Bafoussam in Republic of Cameroon. It is one of the oldest in Africa, although the current building was completed in 1917. It became home of the 19th ruler of the Bamoun dynasty, and the lines extend back to the 14th century. Bamoun is the largest of 19th century grassland kingdom. The original complex was destroyed in 1910. It was photographed by Adolf Diehl in 1909. The original had irregular trapezoid plan of 250 by 180 feet wide, 300 by 450 feet long. It would have domed thatch structures. The basic unit would be a square room plastered with clay, and it would have different living areas, and each would have its own courtyard, and it housed 3,000 people, 1,200 wives, and 350 kids. It looks a bit like a medieval chateau with vaguely Islamic flourishes. This particular one is brick and three towers with conical roofs. There are windows on each level. It has low fence in a lattice pattern made out of brick. Large wooden door framed by tall pillars. It has a wooden veranda and has two wings which end in additional towers that echo the central doorway. Each wing has 3 stories with an arcade on the lowest, which is a covered walkway. 3 simple rounded arch forms. Okay. And then the upper form, again, a little more elaborate. Another arcade, and then dormer windows. These are these windows that stick out on each wing. Very different from the past, but yet still represents power from the king. And now they are considered tourist attractions. Okay, that's it for this version or section.